click on the subscribe button, especially the bell on the right side. Otherwise, you will miss the latest videos. Hello everyone, this is the day I've been waiting for many years. It was a period of 3 years. I was doing only astrology, Saptarishis Astrology magazine, and in the evening I would come and read a book over and over again. I was so in love with that book. Many of you have read that book, and many of you have dreamt what I have dreamt. Many paragraphs of that book I kept on reading and saw this love between a mentor and an American. And it was so pure a love, combined with a lot of mystical stories of India that we all Indians know exist, but we have not experienced. And then slowly came a part of jealousy as to how someone from US can experience so much of that India that we can't even think of. And that lucky man I've been trying to get on Saptarishis Astrology is none other than the legend of legend, Robert Svoboda. Robert ji, namaste. It's an
Namaste.
honor. It's an honor to have you. I mean, I'm so much in love with you, like many other Indians. And it is those days of our lives that you have become a part of. Your love for Vimalananda and the way you showed all angles of a human being, all angles of Vimalananda ji's character, the good, the anger, the other side. And it made me realize how important it is to accept an individual from all angles. It's an honor. Robert G, everybody knows, has written Aghora at the left hand of God. His other book, The Greatness of Saturn, is something which is one of the best remedies I must have given away more than 300, 400 of those books to people during their Sade Satis and or even during hard Saturn Dashas. It's the best book that you can keep on reading. It itself is an upaya, most powerful upaya that even Lord Shani himself has said it in it. You've been a medical Ayurvedic practitioner, and Robert G leads a very quiet life, and probably this is the toughest interview for me because my job is to remove as many great experiences of his out to the people, because people want to know those magical things that you saw and how you saw it, how you experienced, who your guru is. So we have a lot of questions. Robert G, the show is yours. Please tell us, how did you land up into this mystical part of India that none of us have been so fortunate about?
Well, it was completely according to what we could call it Vidata or Deva or Kismet or whatever it was. I was very fortunate to have graduated from college in the USA when I was only 18. I was a good student and I knew how to take examinations well. And I didn't know what to do with myself. I had friends going to medical school. I decided to go to medical school, But before I went, I decided that I would do something exotic. So I went to Africa. I crossed Africa by land. I got to Kenya. I was invited to join a tribe, the Pokot tribe. I joined the tribe, and I realized that there was a lot more to the world than I had found out in the United States. On the United States as being the place where everything happens in the world, and many people have no clue as to what's really going on anywhere else. And so I got a delay in my admission to medical school. I flew to London. I crossed overland to Nepal. I spent 3 months in Nepal. I loved it. And I heard that there was going to be a Kala Chakra Diksha by the Dalai Lama in Bodh Gaya in January of 1974. And there was the Kala Chakra, and there were interesting things that happened there, and there were many yogis, the Dalai Lama himself, of course, but especially a great Tibetan yogi named Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. And I was very impressed by them. And I had really no concept of yoga. I had read the Bhagavad Gita in high school, but in an archaic translation, and it really didn't mean anything to me. But these individuals meant something to me because they had something about them. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was something I needed to try to pursue for myself. So from Gaya to Bombay, I took the train to meet a high school friend. And I arrived in Bombay, felt immediately at home, as I still do. I've spent a lot of time there. It's a place that I very much resonate with. And after being there 2 or 3 days, I was very unclear as to what I was going to do next. I was thinking about taking the boat to Mombasa and going back to the tribe. And one evening, when I was with an American friend. We were looking for a place to have dinner. Walked up to a small restaurant, Chinese restaurant on the Colaba Causeway. Hasn't been there for many years. And a man and his wife and son were walking out of the restaurant at that moment. And I asked the man, "Is this a good restaurant? Should we eat here?" And I don't know what came over him at that moment, but he whipped out some money, handed it to us, said, "Please eat at the restaurant tonight and come eat with us tomorrow." And this was this seemed like some sort of potentially useful thing. So we ate in that restaurant. We went to visit with them. I found out later this was the only time in his life that he ever invited anyone off the street into his house. We became great friends. He was the manager of the Hayward's Brewery in Uran, which was brewing beer to the same recipe as the Tusker Brewery in Nairobi. So I thought, I didn't understand even the concept of the Karma Nyaya, but I thought there's some connection here. And they said, "What are you doing?" And back at that time, even today, but especially back at that time, when you were traveling in India, you had to have a reason for being there, because everyone would ask immediately, after, "Hello, what is your name? What country are you from? And are you married?" The next question would be, "Why are you here?" And so I had already decided that I was going to tell people I was studying Ayurveda, because that was a good way to make them be quiet. And possibly, if there was anybody who knew anything about Ayurveda, which was very, very few people back at that time, they might give me some interesting info. I had heard about Ayurveda from the Peace Corps doctor in Nepal, and and so I thought, this is very interesting. I met a couple of Ayurvedic doctors in Bodh Gaya, so I was already thinking about Ayurveda. So I said, "Well, I'm interested in Ayurveda," and they said, "Well, we don't really know anything about it except that his name was Praful Daftari, Mr. Daftari said that my mama, my maternal uncle, is Dr. Mehta, and Dr. Mehta was the chairman of the committee that translated the Charaka Samhita from Sanskrita into Gujarati, English, and Hindi in Jamnagar in the late 40s. So I thought that was very interesting. So I went and met Dr. Mehta, very nice man. He was in his 80s. He was quite, but still sharp as the proverbial tack at that time. But obviously he couldn't help me study Ayurveda. So then the Daftari said, if you will just walk, and this was in the Bhaktawar building opposite the Kalaba post office, Bombay 5. And they were on the 3rd floor, and they said, if you'll just walk down to the 2nd floor, just below us is the flat of Dr. and Mrs. Punchi, and they have a saintly man from Hyderabad, and he may be able to help you out. So I walked down the stairs, I knocked on the door, I met Dr. and Mrs. Punchi, I met Shri Narayana Baba, who was the saintly man, and he said, oh, Ayurveda, very good. And he introduced me to Mr. Fazl Boy, who was one of his devotees, also a student of yoga, very distinguished man, owned the Exide Chloride battery factory. And Mr. Fazl Boy said, why, it just so happens that I belong to Rotary Club Bombay South, and one of my co-members is Pandit Shiva Sharma. And Pandit Shiva Sharma was the most well-known and eminent Ayurvedic physician in India at that time. He was elected to Parliament twice, specifically for the purpose of getting legislation regularizing the education of Ayurveda passed through Parliament. Okay. And when he was not debating that, he was seeing clients at his bungalow in New Delhi. So I went to Panditji and I said, Panditji, namaskaram. I would like to study Ayurveda. And he said, why, young man, you were in luck, because it just so happens that the Tilak Ayurveda Mahavidyalaya in Pune is going to have a batch for English students starting in May. So please go back to America, get your visa, because you have to get a student visa in the country where you are a resident, and start studying at the college there. So I took a letter from him, and the letter said, admit this student immediately. So I went to Pune, and I went to the college, and I walked in and said, I'm enrolling in your college. And they all looked at me as if I had appeared from Mars or dropped down from the moon or something like that. And just when they were about to explain to me all the ways in which this could not happen, I showed them the letter, and they couldn't say anything, because you could not say anything to Pandit Shiv Sharma because he was the boss. And so they had to invite me in. And so I became a student there. And they assigned me to Dr. Vasant Lad, who is now probably the world's best known Ayurvedic physician.
Right.
An excellent movie about him has, I don't think it's come to India yet. I hope it will come soon. It's called The Doctor from India. It's really I've known I appear in it. I've known the movie maker for many years now, because it's been like a 4-year process, and it's really worth seeing. But so Dr. Lad took great care of me. And while I was so this was May of '74. I remember it well, because when I returned to India and I wanted to get to Pune, instead of taking the train, I had to take a taxi, because George Fernandez had just started a railway strike. So that was my welcome back to Maharashtra. Well before George Fernandez became defense minister or anything else. He was George Fernandez, socialist firebrand.
Yeah.
So I appeared there, and my parents were a little concerned that I was not studying medicine in the US, but they were happy that I was not traveling around in places, you know, for sometimes in Africa, this was before the internet or anything. So, you know, if you were really lucky in a major city, you could find a telephone that was going to allow you to talk to someone. So they were happy I was going to be in a place where I could be contacted, and somebody could, you know, if there was a problem, contact them in some way. So I didn't want to take money for them for my schooling. So I had been fortunate to have a good job before I left. I saved some money, and I got a grant from the United States government to just do an ethnographical report on Ayurveda, and I wanted to interview quite a number of Ayurvedic physicians, and also physicians of homeopathy and Unani and so on, in the Pune area. So the Sanskrit professor, Dr. Bhavsar, was helping me find people to interview. And one day he said, I was talking to Dr. Galsashi, who is the doctor at the hospital, and Galsashi has a friend named Chotu Vijayakar, who I eventually became great friends with. And Chotu knows a very interesting character who's been trained in Ayurveda and Jyotisha, but who is basically a practitioner of Tantra. And I had heard that Tantra was a very dangerous thing. There are all kinds of jadoo tona and black magic, and you must stay away from them. But Dr. Bhavsar seemed to think that Galsashi was reliable, and Galsashi thought that Vijayakar was reliable. So then I went, and that was Vimalanandaji, and then I went and met him. And I met him in the Ardeshiri Rani Bagh in Pune, which happened to be a 20-minute walk from where I was staying in Rastapet near Quartergate in the college hostel, very conveniently for me. And in fact, at this moment, I am in the house of the daughter of the family that was hosting him in Pune at that time. And so I went and met him. This was September of 1975. And I didn't know what to think, except that he felt like a very familiar person. And I said, I would like to ask you some questions. And he said, go ahead. And he said, I said, I'd like to leave my questionnaire for you to take a look at. And he said, don't bother with the questionnaire. And over the next 2 or 3 or 4 days, he answered all the questions on the questionnaire without looking at it. So then I thought, this is something interesting.
Wow, he didn't even look at the paper.
No, he never looked at it at all. But he answered each and every question. So I thought, I'm paying attention now. What else is going to happen? And it all started from there. So that's a long-winded way of explaining why, if I had this restaurant, the Sea High restaurant, I remember the name, if I had been a few seconds earlier or later, I would not have talked to the man, and I would never have gone to Bhaktawar. I would not have met Narayan Baba and the Punchis. They would not have sent me to Pune. I would not have met Dr. Lad. I would not have wanted to support myself. I would not have gotten the scholarship. I would not have interviewed everybody, and who knows where I'd be now.
So that one meeting, I mean, this is so beautiful.
And that happened it had to happen within a few seconds.
You can't believe it. Just 2 days back, I was at Sailorsburg, and I was talking about this 5-second, that 5-second gap that destiny throws at you. And
yes.
If you miss that 5 second, I was telling them how to create complete storyline like this on a horoscope, that 5-second gap. And this is stunning, you are like talking.
Yes.
Well, one quick thing, I just want to clarify. Vimalananda ji did not look at the question, yet he knew the questions.
Yes.
So he was telling the question and also the answer.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Well, he didn't even bother, asking the question. He was just answering, but it was obvious he was answering that specific question.
In that same order.
Well, I mean, he skipped around a little, but he made sure that each question was answered.
Oh my God. Oh my God. This is amazing. What do you feel was your past life connection with Vimalananda ji?
Well, I think that, you know, I think there is, we could speculate about many things, and really, unless you're a Paramahamsa or a Siddha or something, I think it's very difficult to say that you can really know unless you have really full control over your Karana Shuddhi, or your causal body. But according to him, I had a connection with him going back several centuries on a repeated basis. So it's not even a matter of, you know, what was a specific Rananobandhana. It's that we had a number of Rananobandhanas going on, and that had been going on, and he, I mean, his suggestion was that it had been back well before it was meaningful even to talk about it. So, so the implication that was that even though I had showed up in the United States this time, that I had been in India on a number of occasions. And that certainly seemed that way to me. I mean, I didn't like India when I first arrived. I crossed the border overland from at a Toddy Road. And the first thing I saw in India was a bunch of coolies picking up parcels at the railway station. And it was hot, and it was full of people, and it just looked overwhelming. And then I had my belongings stolen at the railway station in Roxall in Bihar, and that didn't exactly make me feel better about it. But once I got to Pune and to the Ayurvedic college, things turned around dramatically, and I met, you know, it was a completely different experience, and I started to feel very much at home in Pune and in India. And yes, I did study Sanskrit 3 hours a day for 9 months, but even so, I think there must be some kind of previous, some sort of Purva Vidya in order to have been able to pick it up well enough to pass the exams at the end of that time without even, you know, a year before not even knowing the Devanagari script.
Right.
So I certainly am of the opinion, and have always been of the opinion, that Lord Krishna knew what he was saying when he mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita that dying and being reborn was very much just like taking off one vesh and putting on a new vesh. You know, it's a change of garments only. So there were certain advantages that I had to being born in the West, and of course certain disadvantages, because it took me longer to be reconnected to the Bharatiya Samskriti. But it's all a matter of the Karma Nyaya, and of course back at the time that I went to India, the number of Indians living abroad was very small, except in maybe a few like Fiji and South Africa and so on. And now, I mean, in the space of, it's not even yet 50 years, it's 45 years since I went there first. Why, in the US, we've had a governor of Louisiana. This is something, I mean, I have to say, I lived in Louisiana when I was growing up for 3 years. And I was in Louisiana in the 9th grade in school when the schools were desegregated. That was, you know, before that, the blacks and the whites, they went to different schools. So the idea that a non-white could become governor of Louisiana within 50 years, I mean, if someone had said that would happen, we would all have thought they were drunk or insane. But it happened. Bobby Jindal became the governor of Louisiana, the governor of South Carolina, a state that's so conservative that even one of my cousins from Texas, when he was stationed there in the military, he said, I think this place is a little too conservative even for me. They had an Indian governor who is now the US ambassador to the United Nations. So we've gone from a condition where the Prime Minister of Ireland is half Maharashtrian and half Irish and is gay in the bargain. So we've gone from a condition where India was, still very much a very insular place to where it is expressing itself in a dramatic way all over the world. So just that in itself is something that was unimaginable to anyone back at that time. So what's going to happen 50 years from now? God only knows.
Yeah. I've been dying to ask you one question. You wrote one of the most legendary books on Jyotish. Your book is taken as a Bible. You and Hardy Four wrote that book.
Yes.
And after that, you have not, your book, I have a bookshop. I have an online bookshop and also a physical bookshop in Bombay. People call me which book to start with. I recommend your book, Hardy, for the same thing, Light on Life, and also the Dr. K.S. Charak's book, Element of.
Yes. I know Dr. Charak well.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Last 10 years, I have been recommending this as a standard exercise. Okay. But what I has, after that, you never wrote one more book, I think you wrote. And after that means we were expecting so much from you. You all learned it from Mantriji, right? The great legend, yes. Mantriji.
Yes.
It's been so unfortunate. I never met him. Of course, he was based in Canada, but
yes,
he died in Delhi, right?
Was really quite an amazing individual. And it was a real tragedy that he passed away last year.
Yeah.
And he predicted it. He was off by a month. He thought he was going to go, and of course, all of us thought, he's just saying something. But he predicted January of 17, and it was February of 17.
Oh.
Yeah.
One of my friends told me that Mantriji, the way he used to teach, is he would say, this is what is written in the classic, and he would also give the exception rules. The exception rules of when a technique will not work. And that is what most teachers today can't teach like that.
No, absolutely. And he would teach, and if, of course, I never lived in Toronto, so I only got to go to his teachings periodically.
Okay.
And by the time I was coming to him, he was teaching mostly KP, which I have never gotten into substantially. And of course, I spent a lot more time studying with Hart than I did with Mantri. Of course, Hart was Mantri's chief disciple. And I certainly think of myself as a sincere and dedicated student of astrology, but by no means do I think of myself as knowing enough about Jyotisha to teach it. I certainly, Light on Life was certainly, it's something I felt like, and the majority of the knowledge came from Hart, and the putting it together and getting it to adhere came from me, because that's what I do best. But then after we finished those first two books, Hart started moving in a different direction in his teaching. And so, which didn't involve writing books. And I toyed with the idea of writing more, but I never felt that the Vidya was requesting me to bring something out on my own. I still have been thinking about writing a book, not specifically about Jyotish per se, but about Nimitta. But really, Nimitta, the book, is the surrounding environment. So
you should do that. You should do that. I also have been told your book on Vastu, is brilliant, of a different level altogether.
It is. I was very fortunate. I mean, that is the only other book that I've written, regarding Jyotish, and I don't even know how that happened. It's just things came in my direction, and it seemed like the right thing to do, which is why if anything, from that, if the occasion, excuse me, just a moment. If the occasion ever arises to write something else, I think on Jyotish, it will have to be that. The Vidya will have to come to me and say, wake up, do this. And I will say, Haji, and I'll proceed ahead. But yes, I think the Vastu book turned out very well because I was not trying to make it, well, in the same way that neither Hart or I was trying to make our books on Jyotish sort of cookbook approach, but so that people will understand that if you want to practice Jyotish or Ayurveda or Vastu or Rasa Vidya or any kind of Vidya, the only way to do it effectively and genuinely is to minimize yourself and allow the Vidya to flow through you. And this is something I think that most doctors who are successful as doctors learn early on. Many doctors, and I expect this is probably true of many Jyotishis, though I know many more doctors than I know Jyotishis. Many doctors start off their careers trying to use their own bala to cure their patients. And what happens after a while is, if you continue doing that, you become exhausted because you, as a human being, no matter how balishta you are, you have a limited amount of bala. The Vidya, however, has an unlimited amount of bala. And if you were open to the Vidya, then that bala can flow through you, and you should be using your bala to keep yourself integrated as an individual so you can act as a good vehicle for the bala of the Vidya. So I have, obviously, one tries to do this, and sometimes one does it better, and sometimes one doesn't do it quite as well. So I have tried as best I can to allow the Vidya to do that, and therefore I've been waiting to, if the Vidya decides I should do something else, then I'm open for that to happen. But
do you miss Vimalananda and Mantriji?
Oh, yes, definitely, because if you never meet anyone like that, you never know what you're missing. But I was so fortunate to meet Vimalananda ji, Junior Guru Maharaj, Mantri ji, and a couple of other people of an equal degree of being unusual, and sad to say, the vast majority of people are much more usual than unusual. And so, yes, I very much, and I'm very fortunate. I would like to be the first person to say that, to express my gratitude to all of my teachers, to the universe in general. I'm fortunate in so many ways. And I think one of the big problems that people have today is that they have become so much overtaken by desire that they forget what it means to be appreciative of everything that they have. And so I'm just so thankful to everything that has come my way, and especially these unique individuals that have given me a totally different perspective of what the possibilities are to be a human being. Or in the case of someone like Junior Guru Maharaj, something that is, may have started off as a human being and now is not quite exactly anymore precisely a human being.
That part I wanted, if it is possible for you to say something more about Junior Guru Maharaj.
Well,
What did he become eventually? I mean, I think he was 200, 300 years old, or?
he would never say, and he was found in a cave. He had a certificate from the archaeological survey. It didn't say in Samadhi, but it did say he was found in a cave in 1905 in Orissa. And he supposedly, after he got to where he spent the majority of the next 80 years, or almost 80 years, and that was near the temple of Varaha Narasimha Swami at Simhachalam in Andhra Pradesh. It is said that he spent a number of years sitting in a tree, not eating or drinking, and then a number of years sitting on a rock, and then he started taking a sip of water at a time and then a sip of milk. And as long as I knew him, which was 10 years, he would drink a little bit of milk every day, a little bit of some cola drink, like back at that time it was, Thumbs Up or Campo Cola. And the only solid food I ever saw him eat was tobacco.
Okay.
And when I say eat tobacco, I don't mean he would chew it up and spit it out. I mean, he would get 2 big black tobacco leaves from Guntur, and he would tear them into strips and chew them up and swallow.
Oh my God.
And of course, I do not believe that there are shamans who will drink tobacco juice, but they will immediately vomit it back up because it's a deadly poison. So Guru Maharaj was the kind of guy who would always listen to whatever people were thinking. And one day I was just thinking, how can he possibly do that? And he just turned to me and said, he spoke Telugu, which I don't understand at all. And he spoke very interesting kind of archaic Hindi. And he was always a bit on the, you could never tell what he was actually thinking about or where he was going. But he said to me directly, what is the use of eating ordinary food? You wear down your teeth. And he had 2 rows of teeth.
Oh my God.
He had, and the back row of teeth was completely perfect, and the front row was all worn down to little nubs. It's very interesting. And as you get older, of course, the cartilage in your body continues to grow. So his ears were giant. His xiphisternum, that's down at the bottom of your sternum here, that was like about 2 inches long. And most people, it's, I don't know, half an inch or something.
Yeah.
So he was really, really old, for sure. And he said, you wear down your teeth when you eat, and then you may digest it or not. You have to excrete it. You will wear out your digestive organs. What's the use in doing that? It's more intelligent to find something really poisonous, use your internal alchemy on it, convert it into nectar, into amrita, and then stop wasting your time.
Oh my God. So he was converting this poisonous tobacco
into amrita.
Oh my God.
And so he was getting some of his prana from that, and he was getting a lot of his prana from the sun. He was a worshiper of Gayatri. And he would occasionally, he was very generous in his own way. He would occasionally let me massage him. And, but after a while he would say, you have to stop now. So again, one day I was thinking, well, okay, but I mean, he's enjoying it. Why is he making me stop? And so as soon as I had that thought, he said, if you apply too much oil, it makes it too difficult for the sun rays to get into my skin.
Oh my God.
So I said, "Hi, Guruji."
So
What else am I going
he
to
would just
say?
catch your thoughts. Just catch your thoughts.
I remember one day it was during the monsoon, and it wasn't raining. It had rained heavily earlier. It wasn't raining at that. It was drizzling at that moment. I mean, the water was coming down, just not very heavy. And it had been drizzling all morning. And he used to do homa every morning. He did it in a, in his own unique way. He would light the fire, then he would put a bunch of green leaves on top of it, so the smoke would go everywhere. And then it would be, the fire would just go down. So he had done that. He had covered the fire with green leaves. It had been raining for 3 or 4 hours. It was the middle of the day. And we were talking, I would say about, 20 meters from the Homakund. And I looked over there at one point, and there was a flame 3 feet high coming out of the Kund.
3 feet.
Literally. And nobody had been there. I was there. Nobody would dare to touch his Kund anyway. I don't know what people would do if they touched his Kund. Most people, 90% of the people who came to want to see him, he wouldn't meet. He would just say, "Po re po," means go away in Telugu. And if they insisted, he would say, "Po." And if they still insisted, he would pick up whatever he had, including, a bottle or a rock or a coconut, and throw it at them. And that always made them go away. So nobody would touch his Kund. I knew that there was nothing going on there, but there was this 3 foot high flame. And I turned and looked at him, and he said, "When a man has a duni, he's always aligned with it. And whatever is going on with him will go on with that duni also."
Oh.
I said, "Ah, Guruji." What else was I going to say?
Tell me something. You have mentioned in your book about Senior Guru Maharaj.
Yes.
Who was he? Is it possible to say something more about him?
Well, there was Junior Guru Maharaj. There was Senior Guru Maharaj, who I never met. I know one person alive who did meet him, but met him back about more than 50 years ago. And he was very thin. He didn't keep a jata. He didn't keep a beard. And sometimes he would pretend to be a fakir, and sometimes he would pretend to be just an ordinary character from Saurashtra. Whether he was from Saurashtra or not, he pretended to be from Saurashtra. And he apparently always spoke, in that kind of very typical Gujarati that you hear from Maro Haro kind of thing. Very cute. I love Saurashtrian Gujarati. It's very sweet. And then his guru, who was also Junior Maharaj's Param Guru, and who was Vimalananda's, I don't know what the Param Guru or Ati Guru, or whatever it is. Even Junior and Senior Guru Maharaj, they could not meet him whenever they wanted to. So he was, and nobody that I know has ever, or that is still alive, other than Vimalanandaji and possibly one other person, has ever met him. And Vimalananda would never tell me who he was. So many people have speculated as to whether he was Dattatreya or Anat or who he might have been, but nobody knows. So all I can say is what I've heard from Vimalanandaji, who in the Aghora books calls him my Mahapurusha.
Yeah, Mahapurush, right. 30 feet high.
Yes. So I don't know what to say about that.
Okay, coming to Vimalananda, you have, there's something you have made me realize is most of us always want to bracket people. Good human being, I love him. Bad human being, I don't love him. Oh, he's egoistical. I don't like egoistical people. We all humans have this problem. But with Vimalananda, you have portrayed a very wonderful, transparent character. the good, the bad, the ugly, in the sense that he could be egotistical, he could fight with others and try to show them down. Now, how did you land up accepting someone like him? When usually we have the typical human bracket of, I want my mentor to be always nice. So Vimalananda was all shades of an angry person. That's the beauty of Vimalananda.
Well, I mean, I think partly it was because I already knew a little bit about human nature by that time, and I already knew that there was not anyone who was completely perfect. And having looked through history, it was obvious that even the greatest saints and prophets and so on, they all had their own limitations. And so it seemed to me at that time, and it seems to me even more now, that that problems happen when you try to hide your limitations. Over in this country, it has been said many times, and rightly so, I believe, it's not what you do wrong that will necessarily cause you trouble. It's what you do to cover up what you did wrong. So Richard Nixon, when I first landed in India, he was in trouble, and then he was finally thrown out, as he was forced to resign as being president. And it was not because of the crime of the burglary at the Watergate. It was because he directed the cover-up of the crime. So I already had appreciated that all human beings were limited. I never had any reason to believe that there was anyone who was completely and utterly unlimited as a human being. And it was just so refreshing to see Vimalananda, who obviously was someone who was very knowledgeable in many ways, especially spiritual ways, but who also did not ever call himself a guru, and who also did not want people to come in and touch his feet and speak quietly around him and regard him with great. I mean, it's one thing to be respectful to someone, and it's another to kind of wander around and be all overawed by someone. He never wanted people to be overawed by him. He wanted to interact with people in a human, interactive kind of way, because he wanted to work out his rananubandhanas, his bondage of karmic debt. So I was already open to the idea of, whoever it was, and I had been studying with this Narayana Baba for a year and a half, and I had traveled with him, and I had already seen that there were certain areas of his life where he was very much connected to reality, and certain areas where he was very much a standard human being. He was a Tulu Brahmin, but living in Sanjeeva Reddy Nagar near Begumpet in Hyderabad at the time. So I already had seen that someone who can be very accomplished in one way may have limitations, and everyone has limitations. So it was not that difficult for me to accept Vimalananda's limitations, because he himself accepted his limitations. And one of the first things I remember him saying, just a few days after we had met for the first time in Pune, I was talking to him, and he had already started to display to me that he could describe things at a distance, like you have this in your room and there is this in your room at home. And yeah, obviously he could only know that if he had directly traveled there in some way. And he was telling me about a nun that he had met a few days earlier who had come to him because she had arthritis. And she was a Catholic nun, a Catholic or Orthodox, I think a Catholic nun. And he said, I started telling her, well, probably you have arthritis because you've been eating too much pork. And it turned out he was a vegetarian. And he said, I had to pull my ears at that one because I assumed she was eating pork just because she was a Christian, when in fact she was not doing that. So this is what you get for assuming things, Robbie, pay attention. So for somebody who was so ready to acknowledge his own limitations, that made it a lot easier for me to accept those limitations in him.
But what is Aghora? I mean, if I were to ask you, taking the context of your book, your legendary book, where you have shown your mentor in all shades of the color spectrum, where his drinking, his what do you call, having a free sex life or whatever. Now, why does Aghora not put a limitation on it? If as a student I were to ask you this, because many of our viewers would be thinking about this. So because you've been such a great exponent of this science, so how is there no limitation in that?
Well, Vimalanandaji described Aghora in a number of ways, but I'm going to describe it in the way that speaks most to me. And he used to say, and he wasn't speaking specifically about Aghora, but I think that this is, I mean, the word itself, Ghora in Sanskrit, means terrible, terrifying, intense, unbearable, something you want to avoid completely. And Aghora means everything that is not that way. So basically the practice of Aghora is taking everything that is not well balanced in life and making it well balanced. And that includes a lot of things that are very hard to balance, like dealing with all of the limitations of the human body and the personality and the inevitability of death, for example, and all the influences, especially unseen, that are affecting us and how they are affecting us. But one thing that I think of regularly and repeatedly is something that he said on more than one occasion, and that is that people would ask him what religion he belonged to, and he was born into the Pushti Sampradaya, the Vallabhacharya Kula. And his parents, even though they were born into the Pushti Sampradaya, their guru was Haranath Thakur from Bengal. And so right there was a certain amount of, I wouldn't say dissonance, but it's like, the family, there was the Kula Devata, the Srinathji, and then there was, of course, the Ishta Devata that was given to them by the Guru, and the Guru himself was worshipped as an Ishta. So right there was a difference in Sampradaya when it came to his parents. And when it came to him, what he would say is, when people would ask him which Sampradaya he belonged to, he would say, I don't believe in Sampradaya, I believe in Sampradaha, which means complete incineration. So he would say, burning down everything that is in between you and your direct perception of reality. And so I think that's what Aghora is all about. We have all these constructions inside ourselves about what reality is and should be, and what it means to be spiritual and what it means to be not spiritual, and who is real and who is not real, and who is holy and who is not holy. And his philosophy was burn down all these limitations burn down all your assumptions, and do everything that you can so you can perceive reality directly in the present moment. And at this point, I think it is good to recognize that any perception that a human being receives is already in the past. Maybe not very far in the past, but the very fact that it looks to me like I'm seeing you in present time, but there's a few microseconds of delay between when the photons hit your face and when those photons get to me. Actually, not even microseconds, milliseconds, a few thousandths of a second. So I'm seeing you as you were. Just as we see light coming from stars billions of light years away, that means we're seeing them as they were billions of years ago. We have no idea what they are like now. We will never know.
Yeah.
We're seeing the Bhutakala. We're seeing the past.
Past.
But even when it seems like we're seeing the present, we're still seeing the past, even though it's very slightly to the past. So to be able to get beyond that past in our perception, that past in the world around us made out of the Pancha Mahabhutas, the things that are so much in the past that they have gained a certain sort of permanence, that's what Aghora is all about. Not being limited by the past, so we can be present in the present, and that will allow us to have a future that is something different from that future that we currently believe that we're in.
For the first time in the history of people's idea of Aghora, your book brought out a truth about the real purer side of Aghora. And we Indians land up hating Aghoris because of the various practices they do. Probably we don't understand it. And at the same time, that black magic, tantra, that fear. But Vimalananda ji explained the philosophy of Aghora, of mastering each and every aspect of life that way. Now, my question is, why do most people get obsessed with the powers associated with Tantra? Why? Why don't they get spiritual enough?
Well, there was some English writer many years ago, English meaning from Britain, who wrote, and he was talking about political power, but he said absolute power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Now, it's worth paying attention to that phrase. He was talking about politics, but this applies to any kind of Shakti. And many people are afraid of Shakti because they know that Shakti can lead them astray. But they're still attracted by it, because if you're Shakti-hina, if you have no energy, you can't do anything. You need some kind of Shakti. You need Shakti of beauty, or Shakti of money, or Shakti of influence, or Shakti of convincing power, or some kind of Shakti to be able to do anything in the world. I'm talking to you on a computer. I am employing electricity Shakti. Without that, we wouldn't be able to communicate. So there's always an attraction. If you do not have the Shakti provided to your body by food and breathing, and for that matter, sunlight, you're not going to have any energy to do anything. So it's all about Shakti. It's all about energy. The problem, and the reason why Shakti corrupts people, is that who is the person that can control Shakti? That would be the Shaktiman. And we have good examples in the various paramparas of India. We have good examples about the the kinds of individuals who can control Shakti. There is Lord Shiva, who has had two Shaktis. One was Sati, who committed suicide, and the other is Parvati, the reincarnation of Sati. So if you want to control Parvati, you have to first become Shiva. This is why in the Tantras it says very clearly, Shivo Bhutva Shivam Yajet. Only after you have become Shiva will you be able to worship Shiva, because you have to be able to bring Shiva down into your organism, and only Shiva knows how to worship himself. We have Lord Krishna, who was in control of 16,100 Shaktis, especially Rukmini, Satyabhama, and Radha. And but of course, Lord Krishna is not any easier to reach than is Lord Shiva. So if you don't have that kind of complete firmness, that word dhruva is a good word. Dhruva means the pole star, but dhruva also means completely firm. You never deviate from your focus, whether that focus is on Shiva or Vishnu or your guru or whatever, or on the Nirakara, whatever it is, you have complete focus on that. And as long as you remain completely focused, nothing will distract you. Then you can use Shakti effectively without worrying that it will corrupt you. But normally what happens is people get attracted by siddhis and powers and things like that because that will allow them to do things in the world, and they forget that the only people who can use those are people who already are completely under the control of reality. This is why in the Hanuman Chalisa they say about Hanumanji, Ashta Siddhi Navanidhi Ke Data, Asabaradina Janaki Mata. So Sita ji blessed Hanumanji that he could give out the siddhis and riddhis and nidhis and what have you. But if you want to use those, you need to have the same focus as Hanumanji. And what is his focus? Always on Rama. And not on the personality of the Rama who lived, who also was supposed to be 20 or 30 feet high, but on the personality of Rama, that is the supreme Rama in the entire universe. And Hanumanji is always focused on that, and anything he does is for the benefit of that. And so he will never ever misuse his siddhis because they are being managed by the supreme reality.
When you said Supreme Rama, what did you mean exactly?
Well, Vimalananda ji, you know, there's an entire, what is it called? The Nama Ramayana. That is an entire, someone went through Valmiki and took out all the epithets of Rama and turned it into M.S. Subbalakshmi has done a very beautiful rendition of it. The Nama Ramayana. Shuddha Brahma Parat Pararam Kalat Maka Parameshwararam Sheshatalpa Sukhanitaram. So there are many different types of Rama. Raja Rama is one of them. Atma Rama is one of them. The Ayodhya Pati Rama is one of them. You know, Sita Rama is one of them. But the Parama Rama is the Rama that contains all of these varieties of Rama, but is beyond them at the same time. It contains, as Shri Vallabhacharya used to say that, and he said it in a much more articulate way than I can. His abilities with Sanskrit were really superior. But basically, the way that Vimalananda ji used to describe Shuddhadvait, which is Vallabhacharyaji's philosophy, is that if the samsara is true, then that means that everything, if the samsara exists, and if the samsara has emerged from the supreme reality, the Paramatma, anything that emerges from the Paramatma must be containing the essence of the Paramatma. And if the essence of the Paramatma is supremely true, then how is it the case that we think of the samsara as being untrue or unreal? We can think about it as being untrue in the sense that it is not permanent. But we can't think about it as being unreal because it is the manifestation of something that is real.
Yeah.
So we have everything that is manifested in reality, and we have Rama, who, according to Vimalananda, lived 100,000 or maybe 1,000,000 years ago. And that's why he could be 20 or 30 feet high, because there were very few human beings back then. They certainly weren't wandering around like we are. They had very specific things they were doing. And so there was that personality of Rama. There is the personality of Rama that has developed over a substantial period of time as a result of all the people who have worshipped Rama. Each of them has influenced the reality of Rama. And there's the reality of all those people who are worshiping Rama, even though they're not connected to him at all, but they're somehow projecting in that direction. And all of these things, if the word Rama, as Vimalanandaji used to like to say, the Nami will die, the person who has the name, but the Nama has the potential to go on forever. So Rama, the human being, died a long time ago. But Rama, the reality that was used as a name for this human being who is embodying that reality described by that name will continue indefinitely.
Correct. Correct.
So we're in a situation, sadly, where knowledge is becoming very, very superficial. We have lots of information and very little wisdom to put it together. We have things that, don't get me wrong, I use the internet most days, and it's very useful. And it's great to be able to obtain knowledge within a few seconds that otherwise might have, when I first got to Pune and there were a very limited number of books on Ayurveda in English. And when I found a new book in English, it was a matter of great joy, rather than having to go through Sanskrit only, or happily it wasn't too long before I could start reading Hindi and at least have more books available to me. But now all kinds of things are available at the touch of a button. And the problem, this is a great thing, but of course, there is nothing good in the world that does not have something not so good connected to it. And one of the not so good things is people, even in the past it was also this way, but nowadays especially, people start to think that they know something just because they have information about it. And they're going so fast from the you know, from WhatsApp to Twitter to Instagram to the email, that they don't have time for any of what they're picking up and taking in to actually sink in and be digested and be converted to real knowledge and wisdom. A friend of mine who is a professor of Sanskrit at the University of Iowa, a Sanskrit and religion, and a year or two ago was up in Garhwal, not far from Gangotri, and he saw a sadhu who was looking distraught, very unhappy. And he said, "Sadhu Maharaj, what's the problem?" And he said, "I've lost my phone." And okay, so, you know, my friend said something like, "Well, that's very unhappy, but you can always get another phone." And the sadhu said, "Yes, but while I don't have my phone, I can't find out what my friends are doing all day long." Now, this is really ironic. This is ironic because when you're a sadhu, when you're a sannyasi, you're supposed to not be paying attention to the world. Yeah. In fact, in Ayurveda, we use that word sannyasa to mean a coma, where you are completely unaware of the external world. Oh. And here are things that are dragging you back into, now, this is a form of Maya. And it's the job of Maya to keep making sure that you're satisfied with everything in this plane of existence before you go on to the next plane. If I can't remember the name, I suppose it's probably Aghora, but there was an excellent film made about 20 years ago, maybe a little longer, by a German film crew of an Aghori who was sitting in the smashan. Could have been Haridwar. I want to say Rishikesh, but it was one of those two, Haridwar or Rishikesh. He was a young Bengali fellow. And they had heard, the crew, the Germans, had heard about Aghora, so they were just filming him. And they watched him, you know, take his clothes off of the dead bodies, and every now and again he would get a new human skull and clean it out and cook his rice in it. And he was doing all these Aghora sadhanas. That was fine. One day, he said hello to the film crew because he had, the camera was attracting his attention. He said hello to the film crew. They started to talk. He took them to his guru, who was a sadhu living in Dehradun. And the sadhu said, yes. He came to me asking to become my disciple to study Aghora. I said, this is very difficult, but you can start by going to the smashan and, you know, eating your food out of a skull and wearing clothes of the dead and not talking to anyone, not saying anything. So, I mean, he talked to you and you brought him, he's brought you to me. So, okay, I'll let this go this time, but you know, he needs to go back and stop talking to people and pay attention to his sadhana. But of course, that's not what happened. That's exactly what he did not do, this young fellow. In fact, after a while, he took the film crew with him to Calcutta, and introduced them to his family so that they could see how he was being appreciated as an Aghori. And he took them to the Nimtola, the smashan in Calcutta. And then he took them to the red light district. So they could see that he was walking around, hobnobbing with the prostitutes, but not being tempted. And then the film crew, without him, went back to talk to the guru again. And the guru said, this is what we call Maya. I told him, even after, I told him when he went there first, I told him after he came with you, that he needed to go back and return to his sadhana. And what did he do? He ends up going back to his home to show everybody what he's achieved, when he has achieved absolutely nothing, because he could not even be insulated from the temptation that you presented to, that God presented to him in the form of you. So it's not surprising that we are all being influenced by these screens and these cameras and so on. But we have to acknowledge that this is a temptation. We have to acknowledge that this is Maya, and we have to not be taken over by it. Like this sadhu was that my friend met, who was beside himself just because he had lost something that he had never had 5 years before. I mean, what is this saying? And I use the phone. Why, look, I have an iPhone right here. But Vimalananda, who, yes, did like to drink scotch. He would drink any kind of good scotch. He very much liked Black Dog, which is a blended version of scotch, only available for sale in the Indian subcontinent, even today. And I would often pour scotch for him. And frequently he would say, always remember that when you drink, it should always be you drinking the drink and not the drink drinking you. So if you're in control of your drinking and you drink just enough to awaken your awareness, and he would always become more articulate, and he would talk with even greater focus and clarity and incisiveness after he had been drinking. But he said, that's just because I am making sure that I am drinking the drink. I am controlling the Shakti. If you can't do that, you can't take that substance. But that applies to everything. That applies to money. That applies to screens. That applies to everything. If you can use it without it controlling your life, that's fine. If it's controlling your life, you're addicted to it, and you have to acknowledge, like being an alcoholic, that you can't go back to it until, if ever, you are controlling it and not it controlling you.
That's so true of life. What was his definition of sin, or what is the definition of sin in Aghora?
He always said that there was nothing like sin, that sin was just something that the priests and the other authorities had created to create fear and guilt. He pointed out to me that there is no Sanskrit word for guilt. So guilt is something that was not originally part of the what papa karma is definitely there. But there's nothing about the word papa karma that suggests sin. Sin implies a moral quality to it. Papa karma is a karma that was not wise because the reaction you're going to get is not so good. That doesn't say you're a bad person. That says you performed a bad action. So he said sin was something invented by the priests so that they could charge more money to people for a bunch of rituals to get rid of the so-called sin.
What would he or you advise as the best prayashchit karma?
Well, the absolute best prayashchit karma, according to him, was nama japa. Repeat the name of Bhagawan. Whichever Bhagawan is the Bhagawan that you have faith in. And as Mantri used to say, if you want to know who you have faith in, it's whoever would be the face that would come to you if you were drowning at the last moment. So that whatever it is that is most important to you, absolutely fundamental, that's the thing that you're going to remember when you're going down for the last time. Whatever that is the thing you have faith in. And faith is important, especially to doctors, because people get healed because they have faith. It almost doesn't matter what you have faith in, almost, but you have to have faith, because faith is the thing that connects you to prana, and prana is the thing that heals you. You may know that there are two major words for faith in Sanskrit: Vishvasa and Shraddha. Shraddha comes from the root hrit, which literally means heart. So Shraddha is something that you feel in your heart, that your heart is connected to. Why is this important? Because the heart is in charge of spreading prana to the entire body through the circulatory system. Vishvasa, shvasa means breathing. Vishvasa means vishesha shvasa, a special form of breathing. So connecting to the prana in a particular way. Connecting to the prana, connecting to the heart, and connecting to whatever it is, that thing that allows you to open your heart and connect to the prana. That's the whole process of faith. So if I, as a doctor, want someone to get well, I have to find out what they have faith in and make them have more faith in it. And I learned this very early on. My father used to say that's what he had been taught by his doctor. His doctor said 50% of doctoring is faith. It's still true, maybe more nowadays, because people have so little faith left. And it's not just faith, like it's often, I have to have faith in something that is off in the sky somewhere. No, faith means you have to have faith that prana can actually do something for you. So it's faith in prana that you really need. But you need that. You have to have faith in yourself, that you can heal yourself, or your doctor, or your nurse, or the procedure, or the medicine, or your guru, or your deity, or you have to have faith in something. You need to find what you have faith in, and that will connect you to prana. And Hanumanji, of course, is the incarnation of prana, and that's why he's so connected to Rama. And that's why people focus on Hanumanji, because his focus is so strong, at least some of it will rub off on us. So repeating the name of God, visualizing the image of God to Vimalananda, this was most important. And the second most important thing was to always surrender to reality. And he had a lot of choice things to say about Islam, but I mean, he knew a number of Islamic fakirs and saints who were very good. And he said, the great thing about Islam is its focus on surrender. I think that it may be what the word Islam actually means, surrender. So when you surrender to reality, you put down your personality and you allow reality to come into you. And he said, this is a big problem, of course, not only with most, Muslim people who think they've achieved something as Muslims, but people who think they've achieved something as Christians or Hindus or anything else, that they think they've achieved something. They let the ego go to their head. The Shakti then is ruling them, and that they are not running the Shakti. The drink is drinking them. They're not drinking the drink. And that is a guarantee that at some point they're going to crash.
Speaking of Nama Japa, can it be done at any point of time? Suppose somebody is taking bath, going to the washroom, having sex, drinking, smoking. Can it still continue?
In his opinion, yes. In his opinion, if you have a guru mantra, you should repeat it at all times. Because the guru, unless the guru tells you otherwise. And if you don't you should first of all do whatever the guru says. If the guru said only recite it at 12 midnight, you should only recite it at 12 midnight. If the guru didn't say anything, recite it all day long and keep reciting it. If you don't have a guru and you picked up a mantra from somewhere, recite it all the time, especially if it's a Mula mantra. The Shiva Mula mantra, Om Namah Shivaya. The Tibetan Mula mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum. The Vishnu Mula mantra, Om Namo Narayanaya. These are they're painted on walls. They're inscribed on stone. So there's no limitation for those mantras. If you want to recite the Vedas, you need to have a lot more restrictions because they were much more restricted. If you want to offer your japa as a particular offering to a devata, it will be nicer if you invite the devata, and they're going to be happier if you have already bathed, if there is not some badbu in the neighborhood, if there is instead kushbu, if you're creating an inviting environment for them, that's a different matter. But if it is just you want to continue remembering Bhagawan, which you want to do because eventually you're going to die, and you want at that moment of death when you're about to drown for the face of Bhagawan to be the last thing you see. So if you're going to do that, you need to be remembering Bhagawan at all times, because you can never tell. You may be in the toilet when you die. You may be eating a Sikh kebab. You may be doing anything, but you need to be thinking of Bhagawan at that moment, because you never know when you're going to die.
Okay. Okay. Speaking of Vimalananda, which are those one or two experiences which were very magical, the miracles that you saw him perform, that you still remember?
Well, probably one that I remember the best is when he was talking to a man who had been abroad working and sending money to his family, and he had come back to India, and he said, I'm tired of working, I'm going to retire here, my family can take care of me now. And he had just said that, I was there, I was sitting there. This man had just said that, and this was not something that the family wanted, and this was something that Vimalananda thought was not a good idea. He thought the man should continue to work. And so he just looked at the man with what he used to call his miti nazar. It was just a few seconds. I don't know how many seconds, because I was just watching, because the man had been talking, and he just slowly stopped talking. And he just sat there for a moment as if he didn't know what he was thinking. And after a few seconds, he started to talk again. And he said, on the other hand, I think what I will do, in fact, is go back to where I've been working and work some more and continue sending money to the family. So he made a complete 180-degree change of his decision within the space of a few seconds in front of witnesses, and he was convinced that it had come from inside him.
That's the biggest miracle.
That was quite impressive. And afterwards, I asked Vimalananda about this, and he said, this particular character is a guy full of tamas, and they're easy to change, because whatever they think, they're going to assume that they have thought it, and if they think that if they have thought it, it must be right. So he was thinking that what he was thinking earlier was right, and then suddenly a new thought came, and then he started thinking it was right, and that's all I had to do, make sure he was thinking that was right, and it moved, and he did, and the guy did go back and work for another few years and sent the family more money.
Okay. Did you ever see him do Avishkara?
Oh, many, many times. Dozens of times, hundreds of times.
Who was his favorite to bring in?
His favorite, I would have to say, was either, well, there were probably 4 or 5, but I would say the most common would have been Smashantara.
Okay.
Very Ugra Devi. and Shahanshah Akbar.
Akbar, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I read that in his book.
And also he was very fond of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, of Kinaram Aghori, who lived in Benares, um, and occasionally, you know, a couple of other noteworthy individuals. A couple of times, Junior Guru Maharaj would come.
Okay. Okay.
But mostly it would have been Smashan Tara, and he enjoyed doing Hanumanji also.
Okay.
So maybe Smashan Tara and Akbar, and probably those were the two most common.
And say, would you remember, say, when he brought in Hanuman in his body? So then any discourse came out, or was it just for predictions, or what was it for? Or a
Well, you know, usually he would always say that you have to, if you want to ask these deities something, you want to ask them in the context of what they are able and willing to give. So, you know, most of them are willing to help people who need some healing. But he said, if you want to ask Smashantara about your business, you're wasting your time. She's the goddess of destruction of the funeral pyre. She don't care about business. Akbar might care about business because that was his job. He was running the entire empire. So he will appreciate that. But Hanumanji, of course, is interested in Rama. So if you want to talk to him about how to get to Rama, he can encourage you, can bless you to move in that direction. Otherwise, maybe he will be willing to talk to you about health also, because he is the incarnation of Prana. And so Hanumanji, you know, whenever he would do occasionally, a couple of times he would do Gorakhnath. Anytime he would do a deity, his eyes would become fixed. They would never blink. He would focus on something that was not in this world. It was on something else. Hanumanji, of course, was focused on Rama. And often you know, his entire body would tremble a little bit just because of the Shakti that was present. And Hanumanji, of course, was always extremely sober because he's focused on Rama. He's the Vira, the supreme Vira and the supreme Dasa. So he is talking to us because we are interested in Rama, and he is always willing to be the servant of the devotees of Rama. So, but he would never, you know, he would only be interested in talking about what it takes to attain to Rama, the glories of Rama, all of those things. He's very one-pointed.
Okay. Would Vimalanandaji's voice change completely?
Oh, yes, his voice would often change. Sometimes his eye color would change.
Oh my God.
Sometimes he would adjust his eye color so it would match my eye color. He liked to play around. He was a very playful character.
And coming to your book, he mentions that he's not going to be your guru. He's just your mentor.
Right.
Right? Am I right, sir?
Yes.
So, do I have the permission to ask you, who's your guru?
You can ask me, but of course, in this particular case, he did mention that I should not tell.
Okay.
So he just said that I would meet my guru at some point. So I'm continuing to wait patiently until that point arises.
Okay. So you're still waiting, is it?
Still waiting.
Oh my God. Oh my God. It's been a long wait.
Well, it's important, as he pointed out, to be patient. He always used to say, when you walk along the road, remember, the road is not going to get tired. You're the one who's going to get tired. So make sure you pace yourself.
Okay. Is his family still alive? I do know his original name, and which is not to be said, you had mentioned.
Right.
Is his family descendants still alive?
So far as I know, there are 3 descendants that are still alive, and I, um, I have very little to do with them. Our karmas have simply not put us on this in the same. I have met one of them in the past, but our life paths have been very different.
What about Chotu?
Oh, Chotu passed away. Chotu was a lovely character, but he passed away while Vimalananda was still alive. I remember because Vimalananda told me, it was like 6 p.m. one evening, he said, Chotu is dying right now. And it's ironic because he told me the whole story afterwards, and he said that he knew that Chotu was supposed to die in Talegaon Dabarde, which is in between Bombay and Pune. There are a couple of Talegaon Damdere also, but Talegaon Dabarde. And he knew what day it was supposed to happen. So he said to Chotu, don't go to Talegaon on these 3 days, please. But Chotu's wife, apparently, who had been taken over by Mahakala at that point, insisted they needed to go to Talegaon on those very 3 days.
Oh my God.
So Chotu said no, but then the wife said yes. So they went to the train station and something had happened to the trains and they weren't running, or they missed the train or something like that. And Chotu said, well, it's not a good omen. Let's go back home. But the wife said, no, we've got to go to Talegaon. So I don't know, they took the bus or something, went to Talegaon, and he died. So
accident? Bus accident?
No, he had a heart attack or something.
Oh, okay.
So Vimalananda said, I tried, but his adrishta, his karmas, were just too strong.
Okay. So, do you now teach people how to recite mantras or the Aghora path? Do you do that?
No. In fact, Vimalananda told me very specifically never to have any disciples, never to have any, to give mantras to people. Now, I will sometimes, like in a seminar, mantras like Om Namah Shivaya and other things that are made popular, the Atma Shartka and so on. I mean, they're kind of public domain. We have them on YouTube, so I don't feel bad about having people learn to recite those. But I never give out mantras or initiate people or anything like that. I was told not to.
One final question which has always confused me is the Aghora Sampradaya. The Guru is Lord Shiva or is it Lord Dattatreya?
Well, that's a good question. According to Vimalananda, Lord Dattatreya was the guru of Lord Shiva in Aghora. So I can certainly envision that many Aghoris have Lord Shiva as their guru, but the Parama Guru of Aghora, we can't call it a Sampradaya because Vimalananda didn't want to call it a Sampradaya, but the Aghora Panta would be Lord Dattatreya.
Okay. And have you been to Girnar?
I have been to Girnar a couple of times. I climbed Girnar once, maybe twice. I haven't spent a whole lot of time at Girnar, but enough to know that it is a unique location.
You met anyone specific or great over there?
Not at least anyone in human form. I mean, definitely I have the impression that there are things there that are still very great, but that are not currently in human form, or if they have human form, the human form is in a safe place where it can't be disturbed by anyone, but that they are still present there, and offering benefit to those who come.
Okay. Thank you so much, Robert G. We would like to have you back on Saptarishis. And in that, I would like you to discuss what path the current student of spirituality should take, which is easier and at the same time most effective in his evolution in this short span of life. We would like, because you have had such a wide spectrum of experience that none of us have had, and you coming from a Western background, Ayurveda background, everything you've done it, you've seen it all. I mean, so something as a guidance for the young ones, because on YouTube there are a lot of young ones, and there's something in your book that you mentioned Vimalananda always saying is stick to one mantra.
Yes.
And that's what we don't do. Even in today's current India, we are doing 10 pujas daily.
Right.
We are for 15 days, one puja, 2 months, another puja. We keep on shifting. So I would like you to come as a guide, as a mentor, and for the young ones, and show us a bit in depth, what should be our puja, what should be our outlook to life, what should be our outlook to Jyotish, how we should treat Ayurveda, Jyotish, and all this. If you were to be given an ideal life that way. So we would love to have you back with that.
I'll certainly consider that, and let's see what our karmas have in store. But in the meanwhile, I would like to salute everyone. And one of the things I'm working on right now is a second edition of the 3 Aghora books, cleaning up some typographical errors, doing a little rearranging, and providing new introductions to give perspectives on how things have changed in the more than 30 years that the books have been available. So
we'll look forward to it. I, for one, would.
It will take several more months, but moving in that direction.
That's great. Thank you so much. And it will be a pleasure to meet you whenever in August you're here.
Very well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Really, really grateful to you. Pranam, sir. Pranam.